Part 64. Online games, I really don't want to have unlimited fusion. Author, 7 years. Chapter 631. Chapter 631 Enter the Dwarves. One of the leading dwarves looked at the undead bird again, then got off the lizard, held an axe in his right hand and slapped his chest, and said to Suchen. Sorry, undead creatures are the life and death enemy of our tribe, so we just lost our composure. The clan leader ordered us to take him to see the dragon god's successor immediately when we meet him. Hundreds of dwarf lizard cavalry made way for them and said respectfully, please. Suchen frowned and asked, how did you know that I am the descendant of the dragon god? The leading dwarf laughed and said, only the descendants of the dragon god and his people in the world are not afraid of the flames of undead creatures. We will never admit our mistake. Suchen smiled and told Ruoshui, Yulan, and the 4 elders to let the clansmen rest here for a while before coming back. The 2 girls and the elders looked at the tough dwarf cavalry with some worry. Suchen smiled and said, don't worry, I can't see any malice in their eyes, you can wait for me with peace of mind. Suchen asked the dwarf cavalry to let go and run, and he rode on the undead bird and followed closely in the air. The dwarf cavalry was very fast, and the giant lizards were so flexible that they slid their limbs and swung their bodies, and jumped forward a large distance in the blink of an eye. Cut off. This creature is particularly good at running fast on this uneven gobi. After walking for about 10 minutes, the dwarf cavalry stopped in a basin slightly lower than the surrounding terrain, and Suchen immediately landed. The necrotic bird, there was no need to tie him up, and he couldn't run. Suchen jumped down and walked directly to an eye-catching big rock under the leadership of the dwarf cavalry. The dwarves led the giant lizard, used a big axe on the big rock, and paused for a while. Knocked twice more. Rumble sound. A 2-meter-long staircase slowly appeared next to the big stone. A light stone was inlaid at regular intervals on both sides of the staircase. Suchen could clearly see the clean ground under hundreds of steps. 2 people, the dwarf soldiers, led Suchen in first, and the dwarves behind led the giant lizards and filed in. Dwarves naturally like to dig burrows underground to live. Unlike the mouse-like goblins, the dwarves' burrows are neat and clean, just like underground palace. It's just that the luxurious decoration of the palace has been replaced by a rigorous and scientific mechanical structure for the dwarves. The highest research representative of the magic canon in the ancient continent is the dwarf race. They are second to none in the world in manufacturing and research directions. Every race, everyone wants a set of armor and weapons made by the dwarves. In the human auction house, anything made by the dwarves can be sold for a good price. For example, the door at the entrance just now requires no manpower at all, and the switches are all tight. Close the door, and you will never see anything different from the surroundings from the outside. To the east is the vast Gobi Desert, and to the west is the endless forest. The uncanny workmanship of nature has created 2 completely different landforms living side by side. Fortunately, the Gobi Desert, the place where the beach and the forest meet, are all raised hills. Suchen flew around on a stupid bird, and finally found a place 100 miles away that was relatively easy to defend and difficult to attack. This area was about 7 or 8 square kilometers. The place is a large hill, more than 20 meters higher than the surrounding terrain. Although the hill area is not large, it is enough to accommodate less than 20,000 people. Fila reminds you, 3 things about reading: collection, recommend, share. N. Online games, I really don't want to have unlimited fusion. Author, 7 years. Chapter 632. Chapter 632 New Basis. Shenlong Ridge. If you want to settle here, you must first make this hilly edge into a dangerous area, dig the slope into a cliff, or build a high wall. In addition, several wells with a depth of 30 meters must be drilled. Suchen has observed that there is a stream with abundant flow at the foot of the hill, indicating that the groundwater here is not too deep. Drilling wells on hills can ensure that everyone will not be troubled by enemies cutting off water sources during wartime. In fact, Suchen's defensive considerations are all aimed at enemies whose strength is not much different from his own, if the opponent has strong air power. Or if the opponent has a group of high-level warriors or magicians above level 7, then there is no need to fight, just run away if you can. As he drove his stupid bird across the hills, no monster or beast dared to block it. Wild beasts and monsters are most sensitive to necromantic fire. They are often dozens of meters away from Suchen, and they will run around like crazy without looking back. Soon, Suchen personally cleaned most of the places on the hills and asked everyone to move them over when he returned. Over the past 2 days, more and more simple tents have slowly appeared on the hills. Suchen would ride a stupid bird around the hills every day, which was equivalent to saying, to the natives around, "The master wants this land, and those who know the truth should get out of here." For the first time in more than a month, the tribesmen who had traveled long distances were no longer intruded by poisonous insects and wild beasts, and they began to build their own homes in this wild land with peace of mind. Suchen officially named this hilly area Shenlong Hills. The first thing built in the middle of the hills was a high platform with piles of earth. For people, they can endure not having enough food and clothing, but they can't endure a life without soul sustenance. That night, the bonfire was bright on Shenlong Ridge. 17,562 Yanhuang people were divided into men, women, old, and young. After following Suchen to sacrifice the dragon flag, they all became Han people. The dragon flag fluttered on the high platform, which was so ancient. The people of the dragon god on the mainland finally united for the first time under the leadership of a descendant of the exotic Chinese dragon, ending their 5,000 years of wandering and humiliating life. In response to the problem that the tribesmen did not have enough to eat, Suchen I plan to make contact with the dwarves in the Dashi Gobi. If I can form a partnership with them, the life of the Han people will not be too difficult. It is early autumn and the weather is still relatively hot, but if I don't prepare clothes now, it will be late autumn. It's winter, and everyone can't stand it any longer. The stream under Shenlong Ridge is called Sister's Creek by Ruoshui's sister, which is her memorial to her departure from home and the destruction of her clan. There are many fish in Sister's Creek, but the stream is deeper and the water flow is faster. It is not suitable for people to go into the water to catch fish. But fishing one by one is too slow, and it is not enough to make soup. Suchen thought of a way. He tied the stupid bird with a rope as thick as his arm, and then tied a rope and held it in his hand. Suchen thought of a way. Chen dragged the struggling stupid bird to the stream and kicked the stupid bird into the stream. The stupid bird didn't need to breathe, so there was no need to worry about it drowning. But the stupid bird hated water and made an unpleasant quacking sound. It screamed and rolled in the stream. Suchen ignored it, pulling the rope and sitting on the shore to enjoy the scenery. After a while, a large number of big and small fish with white bellies appeared downstream, all of which were burned to death by the stupid bird's undead fire. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Online games, I really don't want to have unlimited fusion. Author, 7 years. Chapter 633. Chapter 633, Don't Move. Others happily poked the fish with branches and fished it out with homemade nets. After an afternoon of busy work, everyone had a big bowl of fragrant fish soup at night. The tribesmen set up a screen made of rattan downstream to catch the dead fish on the water. But from then on, apart from becoming Suchen's flying mount, the stupid bird tragically became the clan's fishing tool the rest of the time. For this reason, everyone specially made a set of strong ropes for it, but only Suchen in the clan had the strength to subdue it. Every day when Suchen came back, he would tie it tightly, throw it into the stream, and tie the other end to a specially made wooden stake. The wooden pile was 2 meters deep into the ground and was tied to a boulder weighing thousands of kilograms. The stupid bird wanted to escape unless the rope was broken. After all, hunting in the forest yielded too little and was dangerous, so we had to start growing food. But if we don't have seeds, we can't plant anything. The experienced tribesmen went to the forest to collect some wild plants that could be planted. The yield was very low, and what they grew could barely be used as food. The key point is that the solar term has passed and it is not suitable for planting crops. The various seeds collected can only be saved and waited for planting next year. There is not enough food to eat from hunting and fishing, and there is not enough time to plant crops. So after much thought, Suchen set out on a journey to find the dwarves with the hope of his tribe, riding on the wet stupid bird that had just crawled out of the Sisters Creek. Although the Dashigoba Desert is desolate, it is not without living things. There is a giant lizard living here that is 3 to 4 meters long. It is protected by a layer of fine scales and looks shiny. It is especially good at running fast on this uneven Goba Desert. Suchen, who flew for 2 days on a stupid bird, discovered a group of giant lizards, and then discovered the dwarf riding on the giant lizards. These dwarves are the cavalry of the dwarf tribe, named. In addition to their rugged faces, scraggly beards, and waistlines that were the same size as their height, their armor was very bright, and their weapons gleamed coldly in the sun. They liked to sing wildly with their hoarse voices, then take off the wine bags at their waists and take a refreshing drink. However, when Suchen landed in front of them, these dwarf cavalry were stunned for a while, and then ran away one by one, screaming. They ran very fast, not like celebrating, but more like escaping. Of course, Suchen chased after them very resolutely, and did not stop until they called hundreds more companions. Suchen tried to get closer to them, only to hear one of their leaders shout, "Get ready to throw axes," then rows of short axes lit up on the opposite side. Suchen consciously took a few steps back, then grinned and made what he thought was the kindest expression, and shouted to the other side, "Calm down. Calm down. I'm here to do business with you. Crossbowmen at the ready." The people on the other side ignored Suchen. Apparently they didn't think that a guy riding a dead bird and carrying no goods could actually be a businessman. Whoever believes this is a fool. Suchen obviously also realized what he had done. Not very friendly yet, shouted. "Don't get excited. I'm really here to do business with you. My people and I settled on the edge of the forest and were poor in supplies, so we wanted to do business with the peace-loving dwarves. Feeler reminds you, 3 things about reading: collect, recommend, and share. N. Online games, I really don't want to have unlimited fusion. Author, 7 years. Chapter 634. Number 634. Who believes it? Are we fools? The other side was silent for a long time, and finally a stout dwarf shouted, "How many of you are there?" Suchen replied with the greatest sincerity, "Less than 20,000. Unexpectedly, there was a commotion on the other side, and a dwarf he yelled with a trembling voice, "They are all riding on a dead bird." Suchen rolled his eyes and said, "Only a dead bird? Who believes it? Are we fools?" The dwarves shouted in fear, "You demons also lied to us like this thousands of years ago." Hundreds of dwarves fled very neatly, without giving Suchen a chance to defend himself. Of course, for the sake of the food and clothing of his tribe, Suchen chased after him very resolutely. He wanted to tell those dwarves that he was really here to do business with them. Also, he is not a demon. He is Han Chinese. The dwarves stopped again. This time they gathered thousands of people and a large ballista facing Suchen. Suchen shouted directly, "I am a human being, not a demon. Give me a way to prove that I am a human being." The dwarves looked at each other. In fact, they wanted to shoot crossbows at the young man, and the parked animal. It's best to kill 2 birds with 1 stone for the undead bird that just comes down and spins around in circles. The oldest dwarf held down the soldier who was about to move, walked to the front and looked at Suchen carefully, and said, "Although demons can transform into humans, their blood is cold and green." Suchen took out the heavy sword on his back and put it on his wrist. The bright red blood couldn't help dripping on the stones on the ground. "How come?" The dwarves talked a lot and were a little shaken. However, some people still clamored that he was a liar, pretending to be a human being. The key is that the undead fire left him unharmed. This is the biggest evidence. He should be killed immediately, so as not to bring disaster to the whole clan. Wait. The old dwarf called to the restless tribesman, touched his grey beard and said, "If my guess is correct, young man, you should be a subject of the dragon god." Suchen put away the heavy sword and the wound healed automatically. He smiled and nodded to the old man and said, "Finally, someone who understands has arrived. Old people should know that we dragon god people have been living in humiliation since the collapse of the unified empire. Some time ago, there was an invasion of beasts and undead creatures, and we took advantage of the chaos and escaped. Now we have settled at the junction of the Gobi and the forest, but nearly 20,000 of our tribesmen are short of food and clothing, so I hope to trade with you, exchange what we have, and get what we need." The old dwarf glanced at the circle of tribesmen who were about to move with a majestic expression, and then said to Suchen, "The dragon god sealed the demon clan and left behind the entire ancient continent. Since his descendants have asked for help from our clan, our dwarf clan will naturally not refuse. Tell me, young man, what do you need?" Suchen shook his head and said, "I'm not asking for anything from you, I'm trading with you at equal value." A dwarf deliberately covered his mouth and laughed. He seemed to be concerned about Suchen's face, but he laughed loudly. He laughed and said, "You are slaves and have no capital. Now we have traveled thousands of miles, and we don't have enough to eat or wear, so why should we trade with us? Human beings are indeed hypocritical, it's so ridiculous." Suchen said expressionlessly, "Give me 3 bags of wine." The dwarves looked at Suchen and didn't know what he was going to do. The old dwarf said to the people around him, "Give him 3 bags of wine." Underscore. Online games, I really don't want to have unlimited fusion. Author, 7 years. Chapter 635. Chapter 635 Real Man's Wine. Suchen caught the 3 bags of wine thrown over and shook them. They were all full. I opened a bag and took a sip. As expected, the taste was very bland. He got on the stupid bird and shouted to the dwarves, "I will come back at this time and at this place tomorrow." After that, he rode the stupid bird and flew west. The dwarves looked at the strange human in the sky moving away, some looking at each other. They all thought that this human being was trying to save face, but he had to make up an excuse when he wanted to ask for a drink. A dwarf stepped forward and asked the old man, "Should we pay attention to that human being tomorrow?" The old dwarf thought for a long time and said, "Idleness is idle, so why not wait for him for a day?" Suchen brought back 3 bags of wine, returned to Shenlong Ridge and immediately collect various containers for distilled liquor. The large pot used for steaming wine is covered with a pointed wooden lid, a bamboo tube is connected to the top, and a wooden basin is placed under the bamboo tube. Suchen personally burned firewood to steam the wine, while the tribesmen watched. Suchen added firewood while teaching the tribesmen the principles and process of steaming wine. This seemingly ordinary craft will soon become the basic necessities of the Han people. According to the dwarves' habit of being addicted to alcohol, the distilled high-strength alcohol will not be sold at a good price. Soon, liquid gradually dripped out of the bamboo tube, and gradually turned into a trickle and merged into the wooden basin. Suchen dipped his finger into the tub and tasted it, but it was not strong enough. Suchen planned to bring bags of high-strength wine to those dwarves tomorrow and keep them drunk until their tongues would fall out. After the first distillation, only 1 bag of wine came out of 3 bags. After the second distillation, only half a bag was left. Suchen tasted a little, it was spicy and strong. The next day, Suchen gave the half to the old dwarf and let him have a taste. The old dwarf glanced at Suchen strangely, then uncorked the wine, and a strong aroma of wine came out in front of him, which almost made the old dwarf lose his breath. The old dwarf's eyes widened, and he tremblingly pointed the mouth of the bag to his mouth carefully, fearing that he would spill a drop, and took a sip. The old man's wrinkled face turned red instantly, and after a long time he breathed out the smell of wine and shouted, "Good wine." The smell of wine breathed out by the old man also had a strange aroma, and any dwarf who smelled the smell would have the wine bug in his belly. All gathered together with the old dwarf. The old man said impatiently, "Why are you squeezing? Come one by one." After saying that, the old man took another sip and kept it in his mouth before reluctantly passing the wine on. The old dwarf swallowed the wine in his mouth little by little. After swallowing, his face turned red and his body was a little shaky. He barely managed to stay awake. "Ha ha, good wine. What a wine." The old dwarf stared at Suchen with shining eyes and said, "Young man, what is the name of this wine?" Suchen thought for a while and said, "Real man drinks." "Good. What a real man." The old dwarf looked at Suchen with squinted eyes, and asked leisurely, "How much do you plan to price this wine, Su?" Chen also smiled and said, "Don't worry, old man, take a rest first. Let's discuss business after you have rested enough." The old dwarf glared at the little fox, and found a place to sit down and close his eyes to rest. The tribesmen behind the old man were shouting when they were drunk, and those who couldn't drink were so anxious that they went crazy. Seeing the dwarves doing this in one scene, Suchen is very happy _Fe. Lu reminds you, 3 things about reading: collect, recommend, and share. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Online games, I really don't want to have unlimited fusion. Author, 7 years. Chapter 636. Chapter 636 Pillar Type Product. He even thinks that these dwarves, who are as tall as their waists, are very cute, just like bundles of dried meat, cloth, and gold coins. Half an hour later, the old dwarf stood up, faced Suchen, put his right hand on his chest and saluted. "Young man, to formally meet you, my name is Chi Kishi, an elder of the dwarf tribe." Suchen cupped his hands and said, "Suchen, the leader of the Han clan, Elder Chi." Kishi looked back at the clansman who was still holding the empty wine bag and smelling it, sighed, and said helplessly, "Tell me, what can I exchange for this wine? What's the alternative?" Su. Chen had already thought about it and said, "A bag of the wine you brew is worth at most 10 silver coins on the market." "Elder, do you think that's right?" Chi Kishi nodded. Suchen continued, "And the real man wine we purified is worth at least 3 gold coins in a bag. Elder, is this price still reasonable?" Chi Kishi glared at Suchen, gritted his teeth and said, "That's reasonable. Today is a seller's market." Even if Suchen said a bag of 10 gold coins, Chi Kishi would have to accept it in the end. The dwarves' love for wine is like drug addiction, and it has penetrated into their bones. Those who drank Suchen's high-altitude wine, the dwarves no longer touch the low-alcohol wine hanging on their waists. 1 gold coin is worth 100 silver coins, and only the high-alcohol wine can be distilled into a bag of high-alcohol wine. Even so, Suchen paid 10 silver coins per bag for the collected low-alcohol wine was distilled and then sold to the dwarves for 3 gold coins per bag. The profit was as high as 29 times the cost. As for the containers, firewood, and labor used to distill the wine, they were almost negligible. Suchen vigorously patted Chi Kishi and laughed loudly. "We'll accept as many bags of wine as you can provide today, but it's just on credit. I hope that the Han people and the dwarves can establish a trading post at a suitable place in the Gobi, specifically for our two peoples to exchange what they have. In the evening, Suchen returned to Shenlong Ridge with a group of dwarf cavalry. The dwarf cavalry led their mounts, and the giant lizards had bags of wine hanging on their backs. After unloading the wine, Suchen looked at it with a smile. After the dwarves left, he ordered the tribesmen to move all the wine into the built shed. Of course, the place where wine is distilled can no longer just choose an open-air place. This thing will obviously become the mainstay of the Han people in this industry. Confidentiality is the top priority. Suchen held a clan meeting, and all men over the age of 16 participated. After swearing to keep the process of distilling liquor secret, he selected the young and agile men in the clan near the middle of Shenlong Ridge. Build a large wooden house. The outside of the wooden house is blocked from any sight of outsiders, and a newly formed security team is assigned to stand guard and patrol. The stove, pot, lid, bamboo tube, and wooden basin used for distillation are all made larger and more complete. The most troublesome thing here is the big pot. The Han people are now so poor that they can't even provide food and clothing, let alone metal smelting. Fortunately, there are dwarves who are good at forging as neighbors. The dwarves allow Suchen to accept their second life based on the fact that their second life is in Suchen's hands. Chen took away 100 cauldrons, 100 carts of grain, and enough cotton cloth for 20,000 people on credit. The life of the Han people finally improved. The foundation was stable. Suchen discussed with the tribe for several days, and a perfect the Shenlong Ridge defensive building plan is on the agenda. Online games, I really don't want to have unlimited fusion. Author, 7 years. Chapter 637. Chapter 637 Tooth for Tooth, Blood for Blood. At the same time, planning for water conservancy, housing, streets, sewage treatment, and craftsmanship also began. A great leap forward in productivity has begun on Shenlong Ridge, and there is enthusiasm and laughter everywhere. Ruoshui, Yulan, and Suchen solemnly planted the seed of the mother tree of life, which was surrounded by a thick layer of souls of elves, in a place with lush vegetation south of Shenlong Ridge. It would take 500 years for the mother tree of life to give birth to an elf baby. Thinking of those female elves who died tragically, Suchen bit his cheek tightly. On that nightmarish battlefield, in addition to elves, there were also corpses of humans, goblins, and orcs. The races of the team members are so complex, and their force is extremely powerful. Except for the Shelan family, which specializes in slave trading, no other group on this continent has such a strong strength. The enemy has been identified, but there is no way to avenge him. Ruoshui and Yulan would leave a pool of tears when they woke up from Suchen's arms every day. In the final analysis, there are still 2 words, strength. Every morning, the whole clan, regardless of gender, old or young, all follow Suchen to practice the dragon body forging technique under the morning light. After a month or 2, the tribesmen not only became physically better, but their strength and physical agility were also getting stronger and stronger. As a leader, Suchen could clearly feel that his skills were getting stronger every day. Today's Suchen, according to Ruoshui and Yulan, is basically equivalent to a level 6 large monster, and his power is even stronger than a level 6 pure power monster. However, Suchen can't have any ideas for Shelan in the short term. As an old family, the Shelan family even has a 9th level strong man in the family. Suchen would never stop killing some weaklings in their family. Tooth for tooth and blood for blood was Suchen's style of doing things. Since the Black Elves are almost the same, there is no need for the Shelan family to exist. Suchen's revenge goal is to destroy his clan. Ruoshui and Yulan think so too. Ruoshui Ernu taught the tribesmen how to choose appropriate materials and make accurate and powerful crossbows. Suchen taught the children Chinese characters and some history of China, as well as some stories about the unified empire of the Yanhuang people that he had heard and fabricated by himself. When Suchen taught the children, the adults gathered around and listened carefully. So Suchen spoke loudly in class so that everyone around him could hear. He knows very well that what he is doing now is reshaping a nation. Such a challenging and fulfilling thing makes Suchen so excited every time he thinks about it. Sometimes he would beat the drums alone and hum the opening song, The Last Confession, from the TV series Emperor of Hanwoo in his previous life, and then imitate the appearance and expression of Lu Che, the great emperor of Hanwoo, and have a sweet dream. Today, Suchen was freed from such a sweet dream. What woke up was a group of dwarves. They came over to tell Suchen that Elder Chi Kishi said it was time for the delivery of real man wine and they were here to get the wine. Suchen frowned and washed his face first to wake up. Then he stretched out his hand to the dwarves and said, "Where is the account book?" The dwarf took out an account book from his arms. Suchen took it and said without looking at it, "The account book, we are very relieved to leave it to you." The dwarves obviously liked this sentence very much. All large transactions between the Han people and the dwarves are recorded in a ledger and handed over to the dwarves for safekeeping. Filu reminds you, 3 things about reading: collect, recommend, and share. N. Online games, I really don't want to have unlimited fusion. Author, 7 years. Chapter 638. Chapter 638, Despicable Goblins. What Suchen said was the greatest compliment to the credibility of the dwarves. Currently you can pick up 500 bags of real man wine. In about a month, you can come back and pick up another 1,000 bags. At the same time, next month you will bring 6,000 bags of low-alcohol wine to meet our production. Suchen said to the dwarves while instructing the tribe to transport the high-altitude wine from the warehouse. The dwarves became confused after seeing the 500 bags of real man wine. Each one of them held a bag of high-altitude wine. He let go and took a big sip, holding it in until his face turned red, and then he shouted, "It's so good." He held the wine bag and shook it again. He felt that there was still a lot in it, so he laughed stupidly. Suchen looked straight at it. He shook his head. If he were another human race and came to trade with the dwarves, he would have to trick the dwarves to death while they were drunk. But what Suchen wanted was a long-term deal with the dwarves and deceived this kind of wolf. Suchen will not do it the way he came. Dwarves are not fools. Once they are deceived, they will become enemies with you. Suchen waited for these drunk dwarves to wake up before continuing to discuss business with them. Of 500 bags of real man wine worth 1,500 gold coins, excluding the 1,500 bags of low-alcohol wine worth 150 gold coins on credit half a month ago, and 100 carts of grain and food worth 300 gold coins. Cotton cloth worth 300 gold coins and iron pot worth 100 gold coins. You dwarves still owe us Han people 650 gold coins. Take a look, right? We both signed the confirmed account and it was settled. The dwarf took the account book, signed it twice happily, and said, "We Han people believe in us, and we dwarves believe in you too." Suchen smiled and said, "In that case, I hope that the dwarves will add 4,000 kitchen knives, 5,000 hatchets, 10,000 needles and 10,000 bundles of threads to next month's order. At the same time, I hope to discuss weapons and armor trade with you, Elder Chi Kishi, your clan leader." "Okay. We'll bring the conversation to you." The dwarves happily agreed. Seeing that they were about to start a new round of drinking, Suchen stopped accompanying them. "I hope they won't be too drunk to return home, let alone forget what they said." Near Shenlong Ridge there are not only the dwarves, but also the dirty goblins and a branch of the orcs, the swans. In fact, the swans don't like people to put them together with the rude orcs. They are elegant and wise, unconventional. Fight. Their flying ability is comparable to that of the giant dragons on Donglong Island, and their elegant postures can make any dance look elegant. In short, this is a race worth interacting with. But there are many things that go wrong in life. In '89, the Swan tribe that Suchen wanted to date didn't want to talk to him, but the goblin tribe that he didn't want to date was shouting outside the gate every day. The goblin stalked the Han man guarding the door every day after stealing a bag of real man wine from the dwarves. Seeing that the dwarves compared the wine produced in Shenlong Ridge to fairy wine, they were driven by extreme curiosity and took a sip. It didn't matter what they tasted, they actually became addicted to it as if they were taking drugs. Unlike humans, when dwarves and goblins drink this high-altitude wine, they will become hallucinating and feel ecstatic. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Online games, I really don't want to have unlimited fusion. Author, 7 years. Chapter 639. Chapter 639 Building Defenses. Although there are no side effects, the goblins can't stand the ecstatic feeling. For that strong sense of happiness, they plan to exchange with the Han people in Shenlong Ridge with the greatest sincerity. Of course, before they had this sincerity, they must have woken up because the distillery house was too tightly guarded and they couldn't steal it. At the same time, they couldn't steal it openly. Goblins are dirty, not in their bodies. On the contrary, many goblins have intolerable mysophobia. The filthiness of the goblins lies in their thoughts. They do anything to achieve their goals. Cheating, kidnapping, and stealing are their common methods. Those who can rob will never trade fairly. Moreover, the goblins do not pay attention to family ethics, which leads them to give birth to many brain-dead and deformed babies due to frequent incest and promiscuity. The way the goblins treat such mutilated babies is to use them directly as fertilizer for flowers and plants, without any compassion at all. There is no need to look down upon this kind of race. This kind of creature bullies good and fears evil. If you are nice to them, they will think you are easy to bully. When Suchen passed by, he kicked the undead bird directly into the middle of them. These goblins, who were shorter than the dwarves and were thin, were so frightened that they ran away with their heads in their hands and their faces turned earth-colored. Damn it! You soiled my newly made pants. The goblins raised their heads and glared at Suchen. Suchen also looked at them coldly. After staring at each other for a long time, the goblins rolled their eyes, bowed to each other, and said with a smile, "Hello, Your Excellency, the chief of the Han nationality. We goblins are here to do business with you, please don't doubt our sincerity." Suchen sneered and said, "Tell me about it." The goblin smiled and said, "Why don't you invite us to come in and sit down? This kind of hospitality doesn't seem very friendly." Suchen turned around and left with the stupid bird in hand. How could he care about such a pushy guy? The brain is wired. The goblins wanted to catch up but were afraid of the undead fire on the undead bird, so they could only stay where they were and stared at Suchen's back with malicious eyes. "We should teach such rude people a lesson," the goblins shouted in a low voice. However, considering that they only had 3,000 tribesmen here, they had no choice but to give up. One goblin suddenly whispered, "Why don't you tell the kobolds in the north that there are countless people here? Treasures and beautiful female elves? Wonderful." Another goblin jumped up happily and slapped the goblin on the head. "Damn it! You messed up my hair. You should go to hell." Everything in Shenlong Ridge is being carried out step by step according to Suchen's will. The fortifications were built first. Except for the gate on the east, the rest were all elevated and steep slopes 4 meters above the ground. This method of digging walls to raise the walls is simple and low cost. After completion, the entire Shenlong Ridge becomes a plateau 4 meters higher than the surrounding ground. On this basis, a 3-meter high wall was built around Shenlong Ridge, which created a 7-meter gap from the ground, which was very beneficial to the defenders. It took a month for the Han people to build this fortification alone with 3,000 strong laborers. However, the effect is still very obvious. From a distance, the entire Shenlong Ridge finally looks like a stronghold with both offensive and defensive capabilities, rather than an Omura. Feeler reminds you, 3 things about reading: collect, recommend, and share. N. Online games, I really don't want to have unlimited fusion. Author, 7 years. Chapter 640. Chapter 640, The Land of the Kobolds, the Forgotten Grassland. Since there were no powerful hostile forces around, Suchen asked everyone to build wooden houses, dig wells, and open fields first to ensure everyone's livelihood first. Military buildings such as arrow towers were delayed. When the dwarves brought the kitchen knives, hatchets, needles, thread, and brains that Suchen wanted, the production capacity and living standards of Shenlong Ridge rose to another level. But the dwarves are very stuck when it comes to weapons and armor. They stipulated that they would only sell 50 weapons or armors to Shenlong Ridge a month, and they were not of the best quality and were expensive. Dwarves are not fools. Suchen cheated the dwarf on high-altitude wine, and the dwarf naturally cheated him on armor and weapons. And so far, Suchen has not been invited into the dwarf cave home once. It can be seen that although dwarves love peace, they are not fools. Key resources and privacy are firmly in their own hands. Since the first batch of weapons and armor were transported into Shenlong Ridge, Shenlong Ridge's trade surplus with the dwarves immediately turned into a deficit. In the past, every time I traded, I could always make a profit due to the high profits of real man liquor. But now, the money earned from Shenlong Ridge has begun to flow back to the dwarves. In contrast, Suchen had no good solution but to expand the production of high-alcohol wine. Yesterday, a dwarf cavalry kindly told Suchen that the kobolds in the northwest were acting abnormally, and asked Suchen and his tribe to be careful. Dwarves and kobolds had always been at odds with each other, so the dwarves would not fight for Suchen, a friend who was interested in profit. However, it is already good that the dwarves can tell him this news. Suchen immediately rode on the stupid bird and flew northwest to check the movement of the kobold. It took him 800 miles to get to the Forgotten Grassland, the leader's territory. Suchen was wondering how the dwarves found out about the situation here when they were so far away. This is a plain with sparse trees and wild grass growing more than 1 meter high. When the wind blows, waves of green waves ripple on the grassland. The kobold's house is very simple, just a simple tent made of a few branches and hay. Suchen saw that there were not many kobolds down there, only 8 or 9, so he descended. Every creature on the ancient continent is very afraid of undead creatures, and kobolds are no exception. Seeing a human and an undead bird falling from the sky, the group of kobolds howled and tried to escape. Suchen grabbed one with his hand. The hand holding the kobold's arm tightened slightly, and the kobold let out a wail. "I heard that you are very lively recently, tell me, what makes you so happy?" Suchen asked. Since the dwarf informed him of the kobold's unusual movements, it would naturally be detrimental to Shenlong Ridge, and Suchen would not be polite to the kobold. This kobold had no backbone and stared at the stupid bird beside him. He shouted in horror, "Master Demon Race, I say. I tell you all. Never burn me with necromancy." Su Chen was so happy that he recognized him as a demon and said, "It's good to know, just tell me." The day before yesterday, a group of goblins came to meet our chief. Yesterday, our chief took everyone to enjoy the autumn breeze in the newly built Shenlong Ridge in the southeast. "Demon Lord, please believe me, everything I say is true." Suchen said sharply, "Fart. I came all the way from the southeast and didn't see a single kobold. Dare to lie to me and enjoy death.